What is happening, baby? Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Huddle, presented by the THC Sports Show and the Rig T platform. I, as always, am your host, Dallas Clark, also known as Indo is my Nindo, and I'd like to thank you and welcome you back to the show. If you like the content, please make sure you gently press, don't just smash it, just gently press that thumbs up button down there. It helps me out so much more. And if you're new to the channel, please make sure you drop a subscription to the channel and make sure you hit that notifications bell so you always get all the news that's coming your way as soon as it comes out, so you can make those last minute adjustments to your fantasy football lineup that you need to make in order to capture that win. Now, today we're not playing games. It's the rough and tough time of the year. Bye weeks are finally upon us, and there's a lot of huge injuries. When you combine those together, a weak fantasy football manager would be ready to throw in the towel. Throw in the damn towel. But that's not how we work things over here on the Fantasy Football Huddle. We're not one of those weak-ass fantasy football league managers, one of those fantasy football team owners. No, ma'am, no, sir, we are not. We're here to take that championship this year. So we're overcoming adversity and we're getting through some things. I do have some shorts and some TikToks out. Make sure you follow me on TikTok, but let's stop with all the announcements. Let's get right into the nitty gritty, what you clicked on this video for, the week 6 stardoms and situms. Before we get started, as always, if you do, no pressure if you don't, now is the time that I invite you to smoke them if you got them. Let's get it sparked up. Let's get it cracked off right. And let's get right into the news, baby. Alrighty, so before we get cracked off, if you haven't caught the news recently in any of my last videos, I'd like to thank and welcome you guys to my sponsor, Dank Life Clothing Brand. Dank Life Clothing Brand is a clothing brand that makes you personalized clothing items for the team that you love the most, whether it be NFL, whether it be youth Pop Warner team, whether it be a college team, whether it's basketball, and whether it's NBA. It does not matter what team, what sport, what design you want. You send it over to the people at Dank Life Clothing Brands, and Dank Life Clothing will hook you up with some fat ass, badass clothing designed personally the way that you like it. There's nothing worse than being a fan and going to a game or going to a sports bar and wearing the exact same jersey, the exact same shirt as another fan there. It's great to look alike, but I don't like being twinsies, and being a fan is one of the biggest parts of your life, so why not personalize it the way that you want it? Now, another thing that you might have caught is that we're doing the stardoms and situms this week, so let's talk about those pass catchers that we're talking about this week. My starting pass catcher of the week is going to be Adam the Thielen, White Lightning. Let's go ahead and talk about Adam Thielen. Honestly, it's been kind of an off year for Adam Thielen. It's really weird to be putting Adam Thielen in the starting wide receivers as somebody who has struggled through this far into the season and has actually been on my sit list previously. However, the Vikings are going to have a distinct advantage over the Miami Dolphins this weekend. Xavier Howard is the great cornerback from Miami, is going to see a lot of Justin Jefferson. He's going to be locked on Justin Jefferson. And the Miami Dolphins secondary right now is weak. It's battered and bruised. And the Vikings would definitely be wise to increase Adam Thielen's usage this week and take advantage of that beaten, battered, bruised Miami Dolphins secondary. Miami also ranks as a bottom 5 pass defense at the current moment in yards allowed and pass defense EPA. They've allowed the 11th most fantasy points to receivers, notably unusually high games in the yards per reception category. Everything points towards Adam the Thielen having a big game this week, and I'm plugging him into my flex lineup with confidence. But somebody that I do not have the same confidence that I would like to have in at the current moment, he hasn't shown me enough off of the attention that he's getting, is Deontay Johnson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sitting him this week, and it's hard because the volume that Deontay Johnson is getting makes you really want to plug him in your lineup and keep him in there, but he's not doing much with the volume that he's receiving. Also, that change to Kenny Pickett at quarterback is giving a lot of questions right now that remain to be unanswered. So until I see it from Deontay Johnson, I'm leaving it on there. But also at the same time, it's really tough to imagine the Pittsburgh Steelers moving the ball efficiently against that very stout Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense this week. Deontay Johnson has plenty of talent as an outside threat, but like I spoke about Kenny Pickett, He hasn't shown us that ability to get it downfield and get it to those outside threats that he currently has. They need to prove to me that they can connect, they can have some chemistry, and they can get downfield together as a duo before I can confidently start Deontay Johnson in my lineup. You don't want to drop him because he has such high value and such high volume, but I'm definitely sitting him on my bench this week and waiting things out. Now, moving on to who's throwing those passes, the quarterbacks. We're going to be starting Jimmy Garoppolo this week. Jimmy Garoppolo, man, the great story behind that. I mean, let's just take a second to appreciate what Jimmy G has done with the opportunity he's been given. Now, if the 49ers run game was more efficient, like the 49ers that we typically know, they still have a decent run game, don't get me wrong, but if it was more efficient, if they still had Elijah Mitchell, they weren't dealing with the injuries that they have been dealing with, it'd be harder to start Jimmy Garoppolo at this current moment. You'd be looking at him kind of in a similar game of what he did against Atlanta last year, which was 235 yards, a touchdown, and no interceptions. But it's not the same running game that they had last year. And the Falcons are going to be able to find ways to keep it close on the scoreboard. And the 49ers are going to have to put up points and answer what Marcus Mariota puts down. So Jimmy Garoppolo should really have a lot of real good chances to put up 20 or more points in fantasy this week. So I'm liking Jimmy Garoppolo, especially if you're in a quarterback situation right now where you're struggling. I know some people out there that have Tua on their team and Dak Prescott, and they're struggling at quarterback this week. Those are those kind of people I'd be looking at Jimmy Garoppolo this week as a starter and do it with confidence. I'd actually rather start Jimmy G than Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, even Marcus Mariota, who he's playing against. But speaking of Russell Wilson, that's going to be my sitting quarterback of the week. Whatever Russ is cooking, it smells like shitlins because I'm not liking what's smelling like what Russ is cooking. He hasn't been cooking with grease. I know that damn much. Russell Wilson has looked like a shell of his former self, of what we saw in Seattle once he was finally let loose. He scored less than 18 fantasy points per game in every game this season, in all but one game, as a matter of fact, and that includes a game where he finished with fewer than 12 points. Russell Wilson has been an extremely huge disappointment, and if you have him on your team, you're looking at him in agony right now. Because Russell Wilson, you had a lot of high hopes and a lot of high expectations, and you might have even paired it with a Cortland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy, and I apologize to you for that. Hopefully Russell Wilson, and you expect Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett and the Denver Broncos offense to turn things around, but at the current moment, I'm staying away from that. You're also looking at the fact there's 4 teams on a bye, so it's tough to sit him. So like I said, when it comes to my startums and sit-ems, I'm tempering my expectations. But I personally, like I said before, would start Jimmy Garoppolo over Russell Wilson. So there are better options out there this week than Russell Wilson. I'm not saying drop him, but I'm sticking away from Russ. I don't like what he's cooking. Now, what is cooking is the Rick T podcast on Sunday mornings. Check us out for the pregame podcast that we have, pregame show that we have. We do a startums and sit-ems different than what we do here during the week on the Fantasy Football Huddle. We do we do breaking bread, which is where we do our different bets for the week and different locks that you can put in that'll win you some extra money. We do our own pick'ems on the NFL games, and we just have a damn good time. The greatest thing about the Rick T podcast is if we do get up to 30 viewers, which is very easy, you just have to tune in and tell a friend about it. Have them tune in as well, and if we get up to 30 viewers, you get yourself in the running for some free gear. So make sure you check out the Rick T platform on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube live on Sunday mornings. Your boy will be there with Eric Holmes, the host, and the rest of the Rick T podcast crew. Make sure you check out the RTP Sunday morning pregame tailgate Sundays at 9:55 Mountain Standard Time, right when your pregame shows start, and we'll be ending it around 10:30, 10:45, so that way you can set your lineups and go do the damn things that you need to do. Check out the Rick T platform on Twitter, on Twitch, on Facebook at RTP1 app form. Check us out, y'all. Now, moving on into the running backs, the most valuable position. There's a lot of injuries in the running back position, primarily my dog, JT. That shit hurts me specifically. Of course, you know I drafted Jonathan Taylor in at least one league, and it's going to be a rough one for me this week, but it's okay. Make sure you check out my other videos on YouTube. We're giving you some of those emergency waiver wire pickups to go after. But this week, as far as running backs that I'm going to be starting, I might be staying away from Russell Wilson, but I'm starting Melvin Gordon. With Javonte Williams going out with season-ending injury, Melvin Gordon has been presented a severely crazy opportunity to really take over that running backfield and prove Bronco fans wrong. They've been wanting Javonte Williams for weeks, and with Melvin Gordon's fumble issues, and you can tell that splitting carries sometimes and trying to earn that position like you see in a quarterback battle, sometimes that can really mess with a running back. Now, he has Latavius Murray, who still hasn't gotten the feet under him, so I'm not expecting a ton out of Latavius Murray. You've also got the real late round draft pick, Mike Boone, who has been given some carries, but is ultimately still Melvin Gordon's backfield. And Melvin Gordon, this game should really be a chance for him to prove that he deserves to hold that top spot in the Broncos backfield. He's struggled with fumbles, like I said. And with Denver bringing in reinforcements at running back, like I said, with Latavius Murray not quite having his legs under him, and same thing with Mike Boone, this is Melvin Gordon's potentially last opportunity to really take hold and show the Broncos that he is the Melvin Gordon that they picked up and trusted originally, that they dropped Phillip Lindsay for, that they were willing to even out the carries with him and Javonte Williams. Melvin Gordon has a insane opportunity in this game, and the Chargers defense has gotten roasted by opposing rushers at the start of this year, and he has a great opportunity to be yet another running back to roast that injured, battered, and bruised Chargers defense. So I'm plugging Melvin Gordon into my flex spot this week with confidence, especially with 4 teams on a bye and all the running back injuries that we have going into this week. Running back that I am going to be staying away from this week, though, is going to be my dog, J.K. Dobbins. It's been great seeing him come back, and that first week that he came back was amazing. However, J.K. Dobbins has not been very efficient in his return since week 3. Since week 3, when he returned, over 40% of his fantasy football points have come from touchdowns. He just hasn't shown me the yards per carry. He hasn't been given the ability to really even. He didn't play the entire fourth quarter last week in a tight game, and the coach said that was on purpose. So they're still limiting his snap count. They're still limiting his usage, and he still hasn't quite been able to get his legs underneath him and really stretch out and be the really good runner that we think that he can be. So until J.K. Dobbins can show me consistency and can show me those points and that volume without the touchdown, I mean, of course I'll take the touchdown. But if you take the touchdowns away, J.K. Dobbins really hasn't done much. So he remains as a very touchdown-dependent flex option that I'm currently going to stay away from if I can afford it, just until I can see it. Now, last thing we're going to be talking about today is going to be the tight end position. Tight end that I'm going to be starting this week is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals' Hayden Hurst. The matchup may not be the greatest for Hayden Hurst when you look at your ESPN or your fantasy, and it says that he doesn't have a great matchup. However, with T. Higgins potentially going to be missing the game, as long as T. Higgins remains sidelined, you're looking at his volume, which has already been very, very tantalizing. You're looking at his volume taking an increase with T. Higgins being out, their number 2 wide receiver, their number 2 pass target. Joe Mixon has been struggling, and you're also looking at the fact that Hayden Hurst has registered as probably the best touchdown or bust tight end in fantasy football. Tight end has been a very vacant lot of fantasy points this year, and it's been very ride or die. You're kind of, and if it's honestly been very touchdown or bust dependent for most people that aren't Travis Kelce. So you're looking at it and saying that Hayden Hurst has really proven to be the best, most consistent touchdown or bust option as far as the tight end position goes in the tight end lineup. So I'm going with tight end Hayden Hurst in my lineup this week. A tight end that I'm going to be staying away from, and I know it might be hard for some of y'all to hear this, Kyle Pitts, man. Seems more like a pit of despair at the current moment. Kyle Pitts has likely been a top candidate for the most disappointing player in fantasy football this year. I mean, tell me who else you think has been quite as disappointing or more disappointing as Kyle Pitts. I'm not saying he is the most disappointing so far, but he's at least a top candidate for the most disappointing player so far in fantasy. Like I said, he's been a pit of despair. He missed last week with an injury, and he's coming off of the injury this week. He's questionable to play, but he's likely to play. Struggling through the injury and already not being playing well before the injury. I'm not liking the production that I've been seeing when he's been healthy, so I'm staying away from him until I can see him do something productive. Until he has a big game, Kyle Pitts is not somebody that you want at tight end, and he's even hard to sell right now in a trade because outside of his name, he hasn't done much. Outside of being Kyle Pitts, he hasn't done much. So maybe you can swindle somebody in your league on a trade and say, this is Kyle Pitts. He's been struggling. The Atlanta Falcons have been struggling, but I told you to be wary of Kyle Pitts at the beginning of the year. And like I said, he's been struggling with that injury. So until he can show you that he has a healthy, big game, I'm keeping Kyle Pitts out of my lineup if I can afford it. I know it's hard to, but Kyle Pitts hasn't proven you to be what you spent that trade pick for, or that value for, has it? So it hasn't worked out at the current moment. So I'm going to keep Kyle Pitts on my bench, and I'm going to try to potentially go out and get somebody better like Hayden Hurst, even Tyler Conklin from the Jets. Now, that's going to be it for today's Stardom and Siddums. Make sure you guys drop in the comments any Stardom and Siddum questions. If it's going to be before this Sunday, of course, I will comment and give you an answer. But if it's for next week, of course, I will feature you in next week's video. Thank you so much to the Rick T platform. Thank you so much to Dank Life Productions. And thank you so much to you and yours for tuning in to the Fantasy Football Huddle presented by the Huddle Chat Sports Show. As always, I'm your host, Dallas Clark, also known as Indoors Menendo. I told y'all he wasn't playing games today. And remember, though, just before I get out of here, let me give you one nice, lovely message. Never be outworked. Never be out-hustled. And you'll never be outperformed. I'm going to get the fuck up out of here. Y'all have a good one. I'm going to holler at you next time. Later.